Okay, hello Sam.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. This is Kishore Kher. I had met you in Nishit Desai's office in about 7 or 8 years ago, and I picked your brains then for our Yuva Parivartan project, which is for providing livelihoods to deprived out-of-school youth. And I think that was of great use to me because I think one of the big takeaways that I got from that meeting was to go on scale. And we have now, in those days, we must have been doing about 1,000 students a year, and we've now gone to 100,000 students a year. So that's a big scaling up, and now we're looking at 1 million in 2 years per annum. So thanks to that meeting. Now, we are having this conference in Delhi, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to recharge our batteries after this discussion with you and then aim for a much higher figure. That's because the population dividend needs to be, maintained as such and not it's going towards a population disaster in the country because of lack of skilling and lack of scaling up. So I just thought I'll introduce this as a beginning because you have been connected in a way to Yuva Parivartan, and therefore this conference is all about skills development and livelihoods. So please go ahead. We are all waiting eagerly to listen to you for the valedictory session.
Thank you very much. Dr. and Mrs. Kher, Dr. Gokarn, I see him on the screen. Dr. Jadhav, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is indeed a privilege to be here with you on video. Skill development has been on agenda at the National Knowledge Commission for quite some time. I believe we have made a little bit of a progress, but we have a long way to go. I'm delighted that your institute is organizing a third international summit on skill development with focus on skilling, inclusion, literacy, and livelihood. I would like to take this opportunity to express some of my concerns and learnings. At the National Knowledge Commission, we looked at 5 main areas of knowledge, starting with access to knowledge, which include libraries, portals, networks, broadband connectivity, affirmative action programs, and all of that. Then we focused on all of the concepts from school education to vocational education to higher education, distance learning, open courseware, teachers training. We also looked at application of knowledge in agriculture, health, small and medium scale industries. We debated a great deal about the creation of knowledge, who creates knowledge, how knowledge is created, and finally the use of knowledge in governance. One of the most important of these 27 subjects we looked at was vocational education. Knowing that if we were to grow at 8% or higher, our biggest challenge is going to be skill development. Also knowing that we have 550 million young below age of 25, and it is their prosperity, their future, their skilling, their jobs, which has to be the focus of all our core developmental initiatives. So we then recommended 10 things to do. Unfortunately, many of these recommendations are still hanging there. Some are being implemented. But I want to quickly go over those and then go into what I think are the roadblocks and how we need to really collectively focus on it. First, we said place vocational education entirely under the Ministry of Human Resource Development. It is spread all over right now, from law ministry to textile to you name it. Okay. Then increase the flexibility of vocational education within the mainstream of higher education. There is no reason why I cannot be a plumber for a while and then decide to go get a PhD in mathematics. I should have that flexibility. To me, that is the core of motivating large number of young to experiment a little bit in the beginning and not just focus only on engineering and medical education. Then quantify and monitor the impact of vocational education. At the end of the day, we really need to understand how many people we have skilled every year and whether they have been able to be productive in the economy or not. Then naturally increase resource allocation, which is being done. Then expand capacity to innovative delivery systems. Kinds of things. There's a big article on plumbing that this magazine did. It's about a 12-page article on how can we use plumber as an agent of change in India. Plumber is not about just plumbing. Plumber is also one who can take the message on water to every home. But this is never part of a skill development course. Plumbing is not about fitting pipes. Plumbing is about really creating awareness on water. So how do we make plumber the agent of change for water? But I have yet to see any plumbing course talk about plumbing and water change agent. And that's where we will have to think out of the box. So thank you. And I hope I've added a little bit of value to what you are trying to do. I'm not an expert on the subject, but being a son of a carpenter, I take great pride in vocational education. As a young man, I learned how to make furniture. I could still make my own chair, my own table. And I love to do things with my hands. I fix all my wiring at home. I built in the US basement of my own from scratch. So I love dimensioning, hammering, drilling. I love all of that. That's part of my life. And I think each one of us will have to take great pride doing things with your hand. With this, thank you.
Questions?
Thanks for the interesting talk, Dr. Pitroda. I work with Mr.
I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yeah. I'm Meera Shenoy. I work with Mr. Ramdore, but I've worked extensively in this area.
I cannot hear you. You'll have to speak very closely.
Now?
Yes. You almost have to eat the microphone.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Meera Shenoy. I work with Dr. Ramdore. I've just come to Delhi. I used to head the AP employment mission for several years in the government and then worked with the World Bank. Thanks for a very interesting speech to us. I just had a question. Do you think the way forward actually, or one of the important initiatives the government should do is to invest in a lot of online modular material with the help of industry and make it open source so that, and simultaneously invest in the trainers becoming mentors rather than teaching as they do currently, because there's a huge dearth of also trainers on the other hand. So would this be one of the way forwards for the governments to move its role from actually only funding large programs, but also to focus on creating this online modular curriculum content and training the teachers to play a different kind of role?
Excuse me. Yes, I firmly believe that by funding the way we are funding programs, we are not going to solve the problem. And you can quote me on it. Unless and until we really invest in modern tools, modern technology, proper content, using practitioners as mentors, this cannot be scaled. Money will go wasted. As usual, it will go through the leakage. We would have spent all the budget and would have no outcome. This is the story of our life in many areas. So we got to really deliver new tools, new ways to measure. If I invest 100 crores, I need to know at the output how many people I have graduated and meaningfully employed. Not how many buildings I have built. I don't need any buildings. I would not spend even a dime on creating new buildings. Forget it. There are enough buildings. You can today conduct classes in restaurants, bus stands, shopping centers, railway stations. Those are the public places. I go to NDDB and get some space. I go to local bank and get some space for classes. Why do I need buildings? But we know how to create physical infrastructure because we can manipulate that. We need to create really soft infrastructure, which is to me the hardest part. Okay. There aren't enough teachers in the country to meet today's need if you take the same ratio of student-teacher. That ratio is bogus. It is based on the past. I don't believe in it. I don't buy that. I don't need student-teacher ratio of 10 to 1 or 20 to 1. Okay. The entire education system needs to be turned upside down. Okay. I have said in my public speeches in US for last 10 years, I was invited to give a keynote speech by Condoleezza Rice 8 years ago at Department of States, where she was holding a conference on higher education as an instrument of foreign policy. I was the keynote speaker, and my message was, higher education as we understand today is about to die. If I was to build a university of 2050, it won't look like Delhi University, Harvard or Cambridge or MIT. Forget it. It'll be totally different. Okay. But nobody wants to take the risk. Immediately government steps in and says you need 75-acre land, 14 teachers, PhD, it's all bogus. Okay? You don't need all that. You really need motivation, time, and content to learn. Let's not lose sight of that. You don't need government policies to learn. You don't need teacher to learn. You don't need classroom to learn. You don't need duster, chalk, blackboard to learn anymore. Accept that fact and then move on.
If you're referring to a virtual university or virtual academy for teaching vocational skills, the question would be in terms of the rural areas of the country where perhaps infrastructure, whether soft or hard, does not exist in the required quantity, and the connectivity would be a problem. Also, the students may find it difficult to take on or to grasp the intricacies of that for some time. So how would we make this inclusive?
You can't. Okay, you can't. It's like saying, look, I don't have water, I don't have electricity. Forget it. This is a typical Indian question. It doesn't require intelligence. Okay? So move on. There are a lot of people in urban areas who need to be trained. Not that they should be ignored. I'm not saying that. Please don't get me wrong. But let's start somewhere. And not trying to solve everything and not start anything. Okay? I'll give you one example. I'm on the board at the world's largest design institute called Institute of Design. So 7 years ago, at one of the board meetings, I asked the head of the institute saying, why do your students who graduate always go work for the fashion industry? The best of the best will go work for Louis Vuitton, Cartier, okay? And I said, why don't they design better slum? And he said, what do you mean? So I said, why don't you take a team and go to Dharavi? So Dr. Patrick Whitney decided to go to Dharavi for the first time in his life. Had never been to India. Comes to Dharavi and calls me and says, Sam, this is the biggest design challenge that I have ever seen in my life. He said, I'm fascinated with the kind of stuff that is going on here in terms of vocational education, skill development, how they move water, how they create jobs. He said, who is studying this? I said, nobody. In India, they won't study it. Okay? Vocational education should be right in Dharavi. That's where the need is. I don't understand why we don't look at these things. Why can't we go in every slums and organize in a big way vocational training programs for their kids, improve their skills, because it's all about expansion, excellence, and equity. We got to make sure that the poorest of the poor can indeed get the best education possible. Fine, in rural India you don't have broadband, so you don't have broadband. So until broadband comes, don't worry about rural India, okay? And let somebody else worry about putting broadband there before you focus on it. But until it comes, you can't twiddle your thumb and say, I'm going to wait.
Yeah.
Okay?
Anyone?
I am General Manager PNB, sir. I want your views on inclusion. What a lot of work is being done on inclusion in India. Any take by you, sir?
Inclusion means many things to many people. One way to look at it is to make sure that poorest of the poor has access to best opportunities possible. To some extent in India, we have made a great deal of progress. I always give my own example. And this was almost 70 years ago. When I was born in 1942. My father had 4th grade education. I was born in a small little tribal village in Orissa. No electricity, no water, no telephones, no doctor, no pharmacy, no nothing. No schools. I could get, with very little money, masters in physics in India for less than maybe $100 in those days for 6 years. I could get scholarship, 60 rupees a year then. Things do work. Let's not underestimate the progress we have made on inclusion. I am an example of inclusion. Okay. But you can always complain, saying it's not enough, that fellow didn't get that, that fellow didn't get that. Everybody wants favors. There aren't enough ways to favor everybody. See, in India, everybody is saying, what is in it for me, as opposed to what can I do in the existing system. There is enough flexibility in the system in terms of reservations, quotas, tuition fee, poor certificate, everything is there. Make use of it. Of course, everybody can't benefit from it. So rather than complaining about 3 guys who are left behind, let's celebrate 10 guys who move forward. I think that's the way to look at inclusion. If you want, you can get through the system. Of course, you cannot provide training on welding in every village in India. Of course, you can't provide all the facilities that urban India has in rural India. But that's not possible anywhere in the world. Even in America, there are villages not connected today in 2013. Okay, there is no broadband in every rural, community in America. This is one of the richest countries. But that's the way of life. Accept it and move on rather than complain about it. You know? So,
Anyone?
Yeah, there's a question here.
Yeah, please.
Dr.
Can you
Pitroda,
come in
I'm.
front? Okay.
Yeah? Speak? Yeah, I'm Veena Gidwani. I'm a public relations consultant. You shared two interesting ideas for scaling up skilling. One was more of using new technology and virtual education. And the second thought was on the teacher's role being changed to more of a mentor rather than only a teacher. So how do you think these two could be married? Because the mentoring role requires more of a personal involvement, whereas that would be a virtual setup, you know. So your thoughts on that, please.
first of all, don't assume that virtual world does not give you physical contact. Okay? Mentor could be somewhere else. Mentor doesn't have to be next to you. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter. She lives in San Francisco. I live mostly in Delhi and Chicago. And we Skype every day. 2-year-old. So her grandfather lives in virtual space. That doesn't mean she doesn't have grandfather. That doesn't mean our bond is not the same. So I think mentor could be in virtual space also. But at the end of the day, whatever you have learned, you will have to go practice in some factory. So you do have physical space. I'm not saying 180% of the work would be done in virtual space. Maybe 80% would be done in virtual and 20% in real. Maybe 90% would be done in virtual. But at the end of the day, plumber will have to go and hold on a plier and do something. But that can be done at later stage in the place he is going to work. And where he is working, there could be a mentor, physical mentor. So there could be a virtual mentor, there could be a physical mentor, both.
Anyone? Anyone else?
I have good morning, Mr. Pitroda. One quick question. You have been involved with improving the technology in India, and you have been actively associated with the government. So what is it that inhibits the government from the spread of technology to the entire population? What really is the inhibition?
I think mindset. Mindset, because the customer is very young. The guy who's making policy has gray hair like I have. Their world is very different. Okay? Their resistance to change is high. They'll give you 10 reasons why it should not be done as opposed to let's take a risk and get it done. They are afraid to fail. And when you are afraid to fail, you can't do anything new. You should celebrate failures. It's just a matter of mindset. Nobody wants to take risk. You got to take risk when you do new things. And it may not work for a while, so it's okay, big deal. Accept that it failed and move on. So look at our courts. We have 32 million court cases pending. It takes 15 years to get justice. Not a rocket science, computerize everything. So you know where the information is, you can correlate. But then, if you computerize just court cases and not computerize prison, police, and CBI, it doesn't work well because there is no interface. So first approach would be we won't computerize that well because the rural courts don't have broadband and all the same standard questions, okay? Rather than saying start somewhere and get it done. Do it in Delhi, do it in Calcutta, do it in Hyderabad, and not worry about Timbuktu in the beginning. Then everybody would do their own little vertical and not communicate with each other. Police will say, we'll computerize, but we don't need to talk to courts. It's all about mindset. We are not good collaborators. All modern work requires collaboration. Today, all research is multidisciplinary. It requires a great deal of collaboration, and it is happening faster than ever before. I think we need to understand this.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Sam. I think we've had a
Okay.
great session. We're grateful to you for speaking to us, and I think it's been very interesting. We got a lot of new ideas on the shape of things to come in vocational training, and we'll deliberate over them. Thank you once again for agreeing to speak to us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.